So Zanele is, what I like about her title is that her clients call her the unlearning lady. And that is really inspiring, because if you can teach us to unlearn a few things, that'll be great. And she's an international transition facilitator and a future work speaker. She's got her own Future Fit Fridays show, which is pretty cool. So Zanele, please, thank you for being with us, and we look forward to hearing what you have to say to us.
Thank you so much for the beautiful introduction. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's always so great to see some familiar faces. So really, really great to be here once again. So I'll just share my story. It's a pleasure to be invited. I think definitely, I don't think anything happens by accident. And this is just me and my view. So I think that whatever happens, there is a reason. There are people that either need to hear me, or there are individuals that I need to connect with. And so I think that there's always just something bigger going on. But that's just me and my thoughts and my beliefs around what's just happened. So thank you for having me, firstly. And yes, I do go as the unlearning lady. I often have to just put a caveat out there that it's not a superhero name. I'm not going to start flying around the screen. It's just a name that my clients have given me because of the work that I do around helping people to shift their perspectives, to rewire, to think differently. It's around creativity, innovation, that type of exciting stuff. But that's not always what I've done. I haven't always been a transition facilitator or a future work speaker. I actually started out as a primary school teacher. Can you believe it? And a lot of the time I often get people going, oh, are you sure? Are you of the right age to even be a teacher? I go, yes. I was a primary school teacher for about 3 years, really exciting years for me, and something that I really enjoyed and I was extremely passionate about. But I want to start my quick talk off with a quote that I think for me really represents my journey that I want to share with all of you today. And as you listen to this quote, I'd love you to please go to the chat box. And as you listen to it, I'd love you to tell me what you think this quote means for you. What are some of the thoughts that come to mind as you think about this quote? What does it represent for you? What do you think about when you hear this quote? So it's a Heraclitus quote, and this is how it goes. It says, "No person ever steps in the same river twice, for it is not the same river, and they are not the same person." So that's the quote. And for me, I've shared it so consistently over the past few months because it's been a quote that's stuck with me and has really helped me to almost form a golden thread in my journey. And I like it when people say that sometimes in life you find yourself coming full circle, where things start to make sense. And I think as women, this is the beautiful thing about us, is that when we get to that moment, it's as if all of the pieces of our lives that in isolation didn't make sense just start to get very clear. And that's what I want to speak about today, about my moments of things coming full circle, where I almost had a light bulb moment and things started to make sense. And I hope that as I share this, it'll make some form of difference, whether it's an inspiration, a motivation, or just a little spark for anyone who may need to be hearing this message. And so let me start here. If you've done something similar, please let me know in the chat as well. I will keep watching that because I love to keep my sessions as interactive as possible. But I was one of those people, and one of those children more especially, who used to, forgive me for this, but I used to close my little brothers in our spare room when we were children and teach them. I used to take my own notes. I'm 4 years older than they are. So I used to take my notes from school because they weren't in primary school yet. So I'd get my notes, close them in the spare room, and I'd go, okay, it's time for a lesson. Both of you sit down. I'm going to teach you. I'm the teacher. I know exactly what's going on. I'd give them homework. I'd give them activities. And then to stretch it even more, I would put on my mom's heels, and then I'd walk up and down our corridor, our hallway in the house with a cup of tea. You know, you have to have a cup of tea, otherwise you're not a teacher. So I had my cup of tea and I would walk up and down, because for me, that was just a big thing. And I would feel like a teacher as I did that. But when I look back at it, I think that's when everything really started for me. Because that's when I realized that as I watched Jackie, I see you say used to do the same, it's a lot more common. And when I share that story, I get a lot of people going, yes, me too, I used to do that too. And for me, that's really when everything started, because I used to watch my teachers at school. Oh, there's Kim with her cup of tea. I used to watch my teachers at school and go, oh my goodness, wow, I want to do that. And so that's what happened. I started my professional career really as someone who was a primary school teacher. I taught for those few years, and it was such an enriching experience, especially because it was in primary school classrooms. And some of the biggest and most critical lessons that I now carry into the work that I do that consistently inspire me are all lessons that I've actually learned, mainly lessons that I've learned in the classroom or somewhere around the school. I'll give you one particular example. So one day we were having a gala. So it was a swimming gala and all of the primary school children were involved, and we were all down at the pool, and I was what they called a house mother. And so house mother was the teacher who was looking after a particular house, and I was in charge of the Swallow house. So I had to line all of the children in the house up so that they could walk over to the pool and swim their lap, and we'd all have fun and cheer from the sides. Really, really exciting day for children, really exciting for the teachers as well. And so I was in charge of the Swallow house, and it was the turn of, I think it was the lowest grade. So it would start from around grade 2 and then all the way up to then grade 7. So it was time for the little grade 2 boys. You just see the cute faces, all excited with their swimming caps. And it was time for them to line up and go to the pool. So I called them all over. I lined them up next to the pool, and I said, all right, it's time for you to get going. But I noticed that there was one little boy who was missing. I went, okay, so I wonder what's going on here. Where is he? And I saw he was still sitting on the stands. He wouldn't get up. And I walked over to him and I crouched down, because it's really important that you get onto the child's level and you look them in the eye, because they want that sense of autonomy. They want to feel understood and loved. And so I went, okay, what's going on? Why are you not swimming today? He looked at me, most gorgeous little doe eyes you've ever seen. And he said to me, Miss Njapha, I'm scared. I'm so scared. I don't think I can swim today. You know, what if something goes wrong? What if something happens to me? I had to catch my breath, because I think you get really emotional at certain moments. And I said, it's okay. It's okay. If you don't want to do this, you don't have to. That's literally what I said. And I said, it's okay. You just sit on the side. We do have a few other individuals who are part of the team who will then swim in the gala. And I lined all of the rest of the children up. I sent them over to the next teacher, who was then arranging them in the pool. And then he came back to me after I'd sent the children, and he said to me, Miss Njapha, there's a little boy missing from your group. I said, okay, well, turns out that he's not going to swim today because he's feeling quite nervous. He's scared. He's not feeling like he's going to swim today. And then the teacher walked right past me and went to the little boy, also crouched down. And he said something that I don't think I'll ever forget. He said to the little boy, you know that you are prepared to do this. You've had swimming practices weekly with teachers who are trained in swimming and know what they're doing. And remember that if something happens in that pool, we are all around there. If something happens, we will jump in there and we will grab you. But remember, more than anything, you've got what it takes. And I'm not even lying. The little boy stood up. You should have seen his chest. He stood up and he walked right past me over to the pool. And I thought, my goodness. And that's when it sort of clicked for me, especially working with such diverse individuals and the beauty of the motherly love that I sometimes found myself giving, and the other type of affection that I feel other teachers can give too, was that really it's about two things. And these are the two things that have defined my journey for myself around this little boy's story, is that as much as compassion is really important for us as we grow, as we transform, as we give our best to other people and to our work, we also need to equally be challenged, because we can love ourselves, we can love others until we are blue in the face. But unless we challenge ourselves to grow, to expand, and to be better every single day, then we won't grow. And so I think on that day, I learned that as much as you can be compassionate, empathetic, and loving, you need to couple it with a good dose of challenge, because that's how people expand and become their best selves. And so out of the different lessons that I learned out of my primary school experience, that was mainly it. But then I did find myself leaving that environment. But here's one of the things that influenced that leaving, is when I really came to the realization that children have a lot more to teach us as adults, especially in the professional setting, than we realize. Because while I was teaching, I became aware of this huge trend that organizations were looking at around future skills. And I was having a lot of conversations with colleagues who were speakers, more especially in the future of workspace. And they were talking about all of these important future skills that organizations were trying to work on, and all of the great work that they were doing, and Google with their ball pits in the office, and all of the things that they were doing. And I actually took a step back and I went, isn't that funny? I work in a primary school classroom, but I think that children are better future equipped than a lot of the adults and a lot of the professionals in their offices and in their workplaces. And so I made the realization that future skills are actually children's skills. But with children's skills, they come in the form of creativity. They come in the form of resilience, frankness, where they just, they're honest beyond embarrassment. And so many other skills that children are able to exhibit that they can easily transfer to that. And so my biggest question then became, then what's the disconnect? If we start off with all of these great future skills, why do we eventually want them once again when we're in the corporate space? And then that's when the unlearning lady concept was born, is that really what happens in between is that we take on all of these other layers, all of these other perspectives around what we can and can't do, and what the rules are, and what company X does, and who we actually are, and what society will allow, and what girls are supposed to do, and all of these other frameworks that we put around ourselves that start to limit us. And so I said, okay, I want to make a bigger impact, but I want to do it in a way that connects my work with children and shows that we've actually got a lot more to learn from them than we think. And our biggest work is not necessarily to become learners a lot of the time, but our biggest work is exactly that. It's to unlearn and understand that a lot of what we take on doesn't serve us and actually holds us back, if anything. And one of the ways that I learned this, I'll give you a quick example, this idea of creativity and innovation, is I had a little boy who I used to teach, fantastic little boy, but also very creative. One day we were having a lineup. So before we all go down to break, we line up on the corridor so that we can walk all of the children down. We were lining up, and then he took a matchbox out of his pocket. Now, let me just put this out there. When a child carries a matchbox in a primary school, there are only two things that happen in a teacher's mind. The first one is, oh my goodness, panic, he's going to burn the entire school down, right? I can see a lot of you agreeing. And then the second one is, I don't have to go to work if the school's burnt down, because then, hey, right? But that's the second one. But for me, I promise it was the first one. The second one didn't even come to my mind. But the point is, I saw this matchbox and I thought, okay, I need to do something about this. I went into, my threat response fired in my brain. But then as I was about to approach him, I noticed that this matchbox was soggy. And he put his little finger inside and he drew it out, and it had a dollop of Vaseline on it. And he started to put the Vaseline on his lips. And I thought, wow, isn't that interesting? Because when you and I see a matchbox, what do we see? Matchbox. But when a child sees a matchbox, they see box, they see container, they see something that can be reused, they see something that has limitless possibility. And that was only just one example that showed me this idea of creativity and innovation that lies within our children, that so many more other individuals in the corporate space and in professional workplaces needed to know about, that we all have the capacity to innovate, to be creative, and to think in this way. And so that's what I do now. That then was the transition from working with children so closely to working with adults that needed to almost be children again. And that's really what I do, is it's introducing adults back into their child selves to say that you can innovate and you can be creative. And so I like to ease myself with the thought that I'll always be a teacher, because I think what happens a lot of the time, and with research telling us that baby boomers go through about 12 different careers in their lifetime. I think what happens as we change careers, as we change functions, as we change roles, we think that they're actually different. But I've realized that they're not. I started my talk with this idea of a golden thread. And I'd like to encourage you today, as I close off now, to find what that's been for you. And for me, what it's been is realizing that I've been a teacher all along, from the time I was in my mother's heels until now, speaking to individuals in the corporate space, speaking to NPOs, running workshops, facilitating. It's all just a further extension of that. And I think a lot of the time when we lose the plot is because that golden thread is no longer making sense. We've lost what it is, and we no longer understand that that's just where we need to go back to. And we need to just keep touching base with that. And so that's what I'd love to encourage you to do today. Go back to that. Ask yourself what that golden thread has always been. Who have you always been? Are you still a living extension of what that is? And I'm not really motivating you, but I'm just sharing my story and then sharing the lessons so that hopefully you can just take some time, especially now because it's almost the weekend, take some time with a cup of tea or whatever it is you enjoy drinking and ask yourself what that golden thread is. Because I found that when we can live from that place, or a place of purpose, as some people can call it, then everything that we do is more aligned. Everything that we do sets our soul on fire. And I think because I haven't divorced myself from the idea that I'm still a teacher, but just teaching bigger children, as I often say to myself, just in a different classroom, then I know that I'm always giving of my best self. And so I'll close off with sharing once again this quote that I started off with, because it represents the work that I do around change, the work that I do around learning. And that's really what learning is for me. It's consistent change. It's understanding that there's no place to get you. You're just always changing, you're always improving, and you're always transcending and transforming into a better version of yourself where you can show up better. But a big part of that is forgiving yourself for the times that you haven't always been your best. And so the quote once again, and I'd love to go back to the chat box and see what all your lovely responses were, is no person ever enters the same river twice, because it's not the same river and they're not the same person. This quote always reminds me of this idea of picking up this book. I don't know if this has ever happened to you, where you've read the same book more than once, but it's as if every single time you read it, you're like, this is a different book. But it's actually not a different book. You're a different person. And in a way, the book is different because you're in a different place in your life. You've been influenced differently. You've met different people. And so everything is always new. But you, at your core, you're always the same. So thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with all of you lovely, lovely ladies today. And I look forward to engaging further with you now in the Q&A and also offline. Please feel free to connect with me offline. I'll share my email address if that helps in the contact details. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Zanele. I think I speak for a few people in the room that when I say I have respect for the fact that you started out as a primary school teacher. I mean, lockdown and homeschooling. I signed up for being a mom. I didn't always sign up for being a teacher, and it brings out a whole different world. And I always laugh because I ask my children, so what does your mom do? Oh no, she teaches grown-ups not to be afraid. I'm like, yeah. And isn't that beautiful? That it just links to what you've said, that just coming back to that childhood and that purity of who we are. Thank you for being so super inspiring. I really, really, I think I can see here on the chat box, I'm speaking for more than one person. So any questions?